Hi, my name is Subbiah Sundaram. I run products at HYCU. Today, we're going to talk about HYCU Protege for AWS. First thing, when we talk about HYCU Protege, right? People, first time when you talk about data protection, I should say, on AWS, they'd say, it's sometimes surprising with how many times I hear from people saying, hey, I'm on the cloud. Do I really need a backup? That's the first question you hear all the time, right? The way we tell people as a guys, it's a myth, because read your contract, because it's a shared responsibility model. The vendors clearly tell you it's your responsibility to protect the data. They will make sure the infrastructure is up and running, but we are humans. At the end of the day, whether we are on-prem or in the public cloud, it doesn't matter. We are humans. Humans do make mistakes, and we got to provide the infrastructure is supposed to be resilient enough to protect them. That is a challenge customers actually have, right? So that is a problem we have to deal with. It doesn't matter where we are. And not only that, we have compliance needs in the organization, right? And people always ask, so what is meet compliance? Because if you're in a healthcare organization, you got to keep the data for at least 7 years, some of them 30 years, some of them for the life of the customer. That's there, right? If you're a financial organization, again, 7, 10 years, very common. There are things there. Those are some of the reasons to start with, right? Because people cannot assume the public cloud vendor does a fantastic job of keeping the data available, up and running, infrastructure up and running, but it's your responsibility to protect the data. It's just not about the backup aspect. There are much more to it than that, right? The things which customers have to think of is cyber resilience, because the ransomware guys don't care whether you're running your infrastructure on Google, Azure, AWS, Nutanix, VMware. They are trying to attack you wherever you are, right? So the question is that, are you protected? Do you have a mechanism in case something gets breached? Do you have a mechanism to getting back? That's the first thing to get. It's just not that. As much as we would like to say everything should be in one cloud, life would be so much more cleaner. We all wish life was very clean, but we all know that as much as we think there's one cloud, it is not going to be a reality. Customers at a minimum have on-prem and a public cloud. Most customers have multiple public clouds. So you have to have a multi-cloud strategy. And that's an important thing for customers. The last thing I'll tell you is disaster recovery. Disaster recovery, people used to traditionally think of DRs only for small set of applications because that's business critical. The problem these days is that with things like cyber attack, right? Any of the cyber attacks, sometimes it locks your entire system down. You cannot say, oh, if you think about how long it takes average 16 days for a company to come back from a cyber attack. If that's the time it takes, 16 days, you cannot tell your customer saying, I'm going to shut down for 16 days before it comes up, right? It's a huge impact. So one of the things people have to do is that find a way to have disaster recovery options, not for a small set of applications, for all of their infrastructure, and do it cost effectively. Those are some of the things people have to do. This is just not from on-prem to public cloud, but it's even within the public cloud, you got to have this capability. That's something which we recommend to customers. And this is something people have asked us. I'll quickly go down into what we do with HYCU for Protege for AWS. It's a true multi-cloud solution, which I mentioned to you earlier, which I wanted to mention to you. It supports your traditional on-prem infrastructure, VMware, Nutanix, physical infrastructure, things like that. It supports AWS, Google, Azure, and so on, as well as if you run VMware on any other public clouds, you can also support that. But the big difference between us and many other solutions is that for every cloud which I talked to you, we have built the purpose-built integration for every platform we have chosen, right? It's an expensive route, but that's what we have actually chosen to do because we wanted to provide the best experience and the best value for you in each of the clouds you have chosen. What do we do with HYCU Protege for AWS? 3 things. It's the backup and recovery or data protection. It's the data migration and disaster recovery, right? Those are 3 things we do for customers. All of this is nice, but the big thing customers care about is it application aware? Can you make sure the data is application consistent? Because the reason I always tell people, it's great that you have a backup and you have your boss, something bad happens and you have to recover and the database goes into a consistency check mode and runs for like 6 hours on a consistent check. That's a lot of time being sucked up, right? you got to find a way to reduce it. You got to make sure it's consistent by the time it's backed up. That is something we have done every time which we do that. The last thing is that, as we talked earlier, ransomware is a problem. And the big thing is that how do you make sure the data is protected and preserved in a different location, in a different place, so that a bad actor entering does not actually get access to it. That's number one. And number two, being able to help you recover at the right place at the right time, be it on-prem, be it in the public cloud, in a different region in the public cloud. That is something you should have the flexibility to do that. That's a quick rundown into what HYCU Protege for AWS does. I will actually continue on. If you guys have any questions, always feel free to stop me. If people ask us, so how is HYCU Protege for AWS built, right? The key thing is that we run right on every platform. In this case, I'm talking about AWS. In AWS, we are a native service of AWS. We are a native service of AWS. It is, when we say native service, customers goes to the marketplace, turns it on, and starts using it as and when they need, right? Even for customers who do not have the billing rights, we have an alternative option too. So customers it's just a turn on service. Once you turn on the service, people say, do I have to do sizing, which regions? We say, that's the beauty of the solution. It's a solution you can run on. You can have your data spread across any number of regions, any number of zones in AWS, and we will do the right thing for you. That's something we have actually done, right? Let's clearly say, supports all AWS regions and discovers all resources. There are instances, I'll tell you, a customer said, hey, there's new region coming up. When will you guys support it? I said, like the day when the vendor releases it. They said, how is that? Because we are integrating to their native APIs. And because of that, it's a true service. As new things pop up, we auto discover and we are able to support you. That's the beauty of the architecture, the way it's built. That's for protecting data, right? And the way we do is that one of the beauties of the solution is that when you log into the system, you don't log in with a HYCU credential. You log in with a native AWS credential. People say, what's special about that? Because we are integrated into the native credential management system. And because of that, it makes it a lot more secure than anything else you can actually do. And it also makes it easy for you to manage all your access controls, because there's one place to do manage and everything system automatically takes care. That's a big benefit there. Yeah. So I'll mention one more and we'll probably get there. So the big thing here is that we talked about on AWS, but most of the customers, like I would say 95% of our customers we talk to have data on-prem. When they have data on-prem, the question is, how are you going to protect it, right? There are multiple things customers come up. Number one, they have on-prem infrastructure. The question is, how do you back up to AWS? That is something we actually do as part of HYCU Protege. In addition to that, the question is just not that backup to AWS. The question is, can you also take the on-prem data and spin it up on AWS, meaning instantly migrate data from one to the other, one cloud to the other? That is something can we do? And the answer is yes, that's something we can do that. And so it's one-click migration, as well as bringing it back, the disaster recovery capability for customers. All this done very cost effectively. And that is something we do with HYCU Protege for AWS. And all of this is done without any agents. On the public cloud, it's a true service. Customers just have to turn it on. It's like the way I think of it is like, yeah, switch, you go turn it off, it's there. On-prem, obviously, it's behind your firewalls. We give you a simple virtual appliance, you run it. And after that, the service is magically taught. Now, when I say magically, because everything we do is driven with REST APIs. And as long as you have the credentials, they automatically do the right thing for them. The customer does not have to do any additional setup or things like that. That's why sometimes customers are blown away by the simplicity. They're saying, really, is it? That's true. And sometimes people question, really, does it work? I said, it's your environment. You go check it out in your Google, AWS, Azure stuff, and you will see all the VMs and containers and snapshots and everything you do. So that's something we do.
I think you're speaking to a bunch of people who don't believe in magic all the time, because we've all struggled with the permissions between network subnets and resource groups and you name it. So I almost feel like you need to convince us a little more that it truly does work that simply.
That's a great question you mentioned there, Calvin. So the key thing is that, what happens is that we integrate in the native identity management. That's the first step. right? And we operate with the customer's credential. When I say credential, we don't own their credentials. We just get a token based on their login and the permissions. That's what we do, right? The key thing is that when you talk about networking, any communication we do, we try to use the private networks whenever possible, as long as within their infrastructure allows. We only use the private network because we want to make sure the customer's data never leaves to the public internet. I mean, that's something there for, unless it has to be in a public thing. That's something we do. The big part for a lot of customers is that because we have the right level of credentials, we are able to manage the networking. There are times, I'll tell you, obviously, when you want to switch from on-prem to public cloud and you have to change the networking, that is something the customer has to do, provide the right level of networking, because there are things which are outside of our permissions and which we have to depend on the customer for doing that. That's something which we end up doing. But it's the native integration. This is one of the things, Calvin, like the native integration into each of the platform. That's what makes it a lot more easier. And one time when I was talking to Ned, I was talking to him, saying, I think of this as cloud intelligent backup. People say, what do we mean by cloud intelligent backup? The reason is that when we purpose built for each of the clouds, right? We know the nuances of each of the cloud. And because we do that, we do the right thing for the customer. A simple example I'll tell you, right? People talk in terms of, for example, let me take the example of backing up. You're in region A and you want to back up to region B. People think, oh, it's simple. What's the problem? Run 2 servers, copy from A to B, it's done. As you guys all well know, even though it's within the same cloud, the cloud guys think of that as an egress, right? They're going to charge you for the egress cost. Like, what do you mean? It's within the same cloud. Yes, but there's an egress. So unless you know to plan it out properly, you're going to pay an egress cost. That is something, one of the things when HYCU does it, right? We run a service. The service, when a backup has to happen, I'll tell you, there are customers of ours who run in like 7, 11 regions they run across the world, right? When they run there, we automatically spin up the right infrastructure as needed in the right infrastructure, do the backup and spin it down. That's again as being the cloud smart. The main reason is that cloud is expensive. You don't want to run a compute 24/7. That's there. We leverage we go to the right zone, so that right region, so that we don't spin up extra costs for the customer migration. Things like that we do very particular to that. I can go on, but I mean, those are the kinds of things we do to be cloud intelligent in that case.
Yeah, no, I love that approach of doing the right thing and doing it in the right place and being cost conscious of those resources. When it's not the perfect happy path, does the product give you some kind of indication or a triage or troubleshoot? I can just tell you the number of services I've ever used inside of an existing cloud provided by that own cloud provider, and their error messages are terrible. Is there some defense against terrible error messages?
That's a great point, Calvin. I wish there was no crappy method, I'll tell you. But in reality, there are times always we can't have constant enhance. But I'll tell you the thing which we do, Calvin, like an example, I'll take one example to your point, what you said, right? Customers think, oh, I set up the backup, everything is fine. They do a lot of time setting up the backup. You know, one thing they miss, they don't set the right permissions in the backup targets. People, what's the problem? If everything is set and the backup target is open to the world, that's not safe, right? It's simple. It's there. It sounds crazy, but I'll tell you how many times you see this people, oh, they didn't realize they checked the extra box, that they didn't set it up properly. That's the thing we automatically detect, and we tell the customer when it's not set right, hey, it's open, right? It's a simple thing, but it's an important thing for the customer. That to help them be safe on that one. That's an example.
I thought you were going to say they never test the restore of the backup.
That also happens, I'll tell you. That's one of the reasons we do actually provide them a secure restore testing capability, especially in the public cloud. I'll tell you, that's very, very helpful for customers because we can let them test in different right? I mean, that's something good thing. You can create a separate isolated network and you test it out and recover. That's a huge value for customers.
I know you said that 95% of your customers fall into the on-prem piece, where they're backing up to AWS, any public cloud.
I want to clarify a little bit. What I'm saying is that when we talk to customers, 95% of them have something on-prem. There are very few cloud-only customers, is what I was saying.
Okay. So I guess my real question is how many customers do you see, and obviously it's supported, in general, where maybe they're on Azure and they're using your product to back up, say, to AWS? I'm assuming that that's pretty high as well.
So that's a great question. I'll tell you, this question comes up, Larry, all the time saying, hey, can I sit on cloud 1 and back it up to cloud 2, right? It's a very great question. The thing what we observe is that a lot of customers actually started asking us a long time back. But one of the things, as soon as we ask them saying, hey, are you okay with the egress cost? Because every time you back up the data, you can do it, but it's like 6 months worth of storage costs, right? They ooh, that's true. Then they start throttling it down, right? It's something there. That said, I'll tell you, over the last year, I've gotten a lot more requests for customers who want to be able to back up data from one cloud one to the other, right? We can help customers migrate data from cloud A to cloud B. That is something we do. But the number of customers doing from one cloud to the other, today, I'll be completely candid, it's a very small percentage, purely because of the cost there. There are other things coming up, I'll tell you, which is not too far. People will see this cost going down. So significant.
Yeah, that's good, because I mean, obviously that's where I'm thinking DR, right? Or if I'm in the cloud, I might fail over. Okay.
Thank you. So what do we do? I mean, like the quick thing, I just want to quickly summarize for our thing here. It's a next generation solution. What do we mean by that? It's because it's built natively and it's a native cloud native solution. That's something we talk about. Cloud native, in the sense it was built on AWS, for AWS, runs on AWS. Everything is natively built with that one. The operational efficiency is something which we talk about quite a bit. People say, how do I really know how to measure the operational efficiency? It's the amount of time you spend on managing the infrastructure at the end of the day. That's the operations cost, right? I'll tell you, the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day. We have customers running hundreds of terabytes of data. And the number of times they log into the system in a week to check, they just log in maximum an hour to just check. And when they do it, most of the time they spend like 10 minutes and then go away. People say, oh, so what do you mean then? Except for recovery, because the whole idea is that we want it to be a set and forget model. That's what we focus on. And truly, because the thing is that what the system does is that because it's a fully managed service, meaning it's a SaaS service, we not only keep our services up and running, we make sure the customer backups are actually happening. And when things go wrong, we tell them that it's wrong. That is something which we do. That's one of the reasons we keep the operations low for the customer, right? They don't have to come and do it. If there's a problem, we look at it, create a ticket, and call the customer and hey, and most of the time we can recover it automatically. But there are times where a networking changes, like what you said, Calvin. We have to call the customer saying, hey, there's something you changed in the networking, it's breaking, can you fix it? That's there. And the last thing is the cross-cloud mobility. And that is something we do. So people ask us what's special about it. And in the interest of time, I'm quickly going through it. A lot of what we talked about before, so I just want to quickly talk about it's a true data protection as a service, because I'll tell you the reason I say true deep pass is that there are times I remember I was talking to somebody and they said, oh, it's a data protection as a service. He said, okay, so you give me an AMI image and run. I said like, huh, if you give me an AMI image and run, that's not a service, that's a software, right? So we got to say this is a true service. It's just a subscription on the marketplace that's there. It's 100% agentless, like similar to what we talk about always. That is something natively we want to make sure. Scale-wise, it doesn't matter which region, how many regions you run, how many VMs or containers you run, we can actually support it. We can support all of your different storage tiers on AWS for the customer. That is something we do, not just on AWS, all the other platforms too, we support. And it is truly integrated into the platform that makes it a lot more secure from a security perspective. And from a cloning or ability to make copies of the infrastructure, be it within the same region or different region, that's all that we make it so simple for the customer. And again, it's in the context of the application of the VM customer cares about. It's not in terms of the infrastructure itself per se. So one of the things I want to switch here, I want to tell you about something which we want to make sure, a big thing what happened for us was that we did the AWS solution. A big part which we found out was a significant number of customers are not protecting their data, right? Which make us think like, wow, we got to do something about it, right? That's where we have built the HYCU Protege, the free tier. We are offering a free tier for customers. So people say, what can you do with the free tier, right? It is, again, the same solution we talked about. The big thing we did with the free tier is that in AWS, lots of customers, still the predominant workload is running in virtual machines, right? For everything running on virtual machines, we want to leverage the snapshot functionality, which is built in AWS, and provide a data protection service for the customer, right? It's a backup as a service for customers built on the snapshot technology, meaning we leverage the native snapshots. We can actually provide you a cloud scale functionality, fully managed service, right? That's a fully managed service, meaning you just turn it on, we do all the work. It's a set and forget model, and it's a full SaaS, and it's everything API driven. So if you ever want to integrate into that, you can completely automate it right now for the customer. And we monitor for you. So it's not your standard script problem, which is like, oh, I wrote a script, I don't know whether it's running, I got to go check. No, you don't have to worry about it. You set it up and we manage it for you. Just to actually double click on each one of them, it's, again, when you want to back it up, it's application consistent backups. We are completely agentless. And the way it's impact free, because it's, again, it's consistent. Take a snapshot and let the application go. It's very, very clean. One of the beauty of the solution, which a lot of customers, the first time they think, oh yeah, I can write a script to take a snapshot. True. Can you write a script to actually help you recover the data? That's a hard part, right? Very few people have script for recovery. They have script for backup, but not for the recovery. That is something we can actually do for the customer. They can recover the entire virtual machine, the disk, the folder, the file at any level of granularity. Again, very intuitively through the UI mechanism, rather than having to worry about any of the writing script or mounting it and doing all sorts of stuff, which is a pain for customers. That is something we do. And the big part also happens for customers is that people, when they write script, the guy or girl who wrote the script know exactly what to do. The question is that, what's your recovery time objective? How often are you trying to back up? That's a little hard, nebulous thing for people. Whereas with HYCU's free tier, it's a very intuitive thing to the customer. You can say, hey, do I want gold, silver, bronze? Choose it. And how often I want to take a snapshot? And when do I want to back it up? It's set up there. And it's free for the customer, right? It's truly a set and forget. And it's one, as I always say, it's one-click backup, meaning you select it, apply the policy, and you're done. Everything else, no retention management, no schedule management, all that stuff, no agent deployment, all that stuff is done by HYCU for the customer as needed. Right? So that's a quick, some of the things which are there. From a full visibility, a big part, one of the concerns which we hear from customers on AWS is that they back up all the data. They think they have backed up. The problem is that, do you have a simple way to quickly tell you saying, hey, have you protected all your data, what state they are and what's not protected, right? It is just to give them confidence. That is something right in our console. We provide you this information. It is a very clean, simple click to actually get the full view of what's being protected and what's not protected. And this is not just at your single account level. Most of the customers we see in AWS have lots of accounts. People say, why? Because every department, the way they segment it is every department has their own account, because that way they can have their own billing, they can have own management. But the person responsible for their whole cloud wants to know if everything is protected. That is something we can provide across account visibility, not just on a single thing, but across the board. We can do that. And the classic monitoring reporting, which is required by people, and also integrating this information into their native other monitoring tools, that's all built in. And it's provided as part of the native service. It's all an API driven. It's available for the customers.
Subbiah, I have a question about that notifications, because I know email, that's the traditional way, but a lot of people like to spend their day. Well, maybe don't like, but they do spend their day in Slack or Teams. So do you have integrations with those so you can practice more of like a chat ops style with your backups?
That's an excellent point you mentioned, and we should have actually changed that instead of not of email notification, because we also do web. We do have web hooks, which will allow you to do your Slack and Teams notification if that's what you're used to. Absolutely. So you don't have to monitor anything. It'll just tell you when there's a problem. A lot of people get notified for that. I love that. I love the question there.
In terms of discovery, because you're saying it provides AWS visibility, this is your percentage of coverage. Is it just discovering every single EC2 instance, or can you apply filtering based off of tags or something? So you can say, I don't ever care about my development instances or environments, so I'm going to tag them with this special thing so they're ignored in terms of coverage.
Great point, Ned. So essentially what happens that by discovery, by default, we discover everything. The question comes down to what you said as around saying, what do you want to protect and when do you want me to complain and when not to complain, right? Meaning what's protected, what's not protected, right? You have the ability using tags, you can specify what's critical for you and what's not critical for you. And we also use the tags to automatically select the right policy for you. So you don't even have to, when you create the instance itself, you can say, hey, this is the dev machine, test machine, prod machine, all that stuff. As you do it, it automatically apply the right policy for it. You don't have to do anything further, right? So to your point, tagging is used for a variety of purposes. Discovery itself, we do the whole thing because we need to know what's there, but you can decide to say what to protect, what not to protect, and how to protect. That is something there.
I'm just curious from a cost reporting standpoint. I want to know if somebody's going way over their budget on storage, because I want to maybe talk to them and go, okay, we got to lower your retention or something to get a handle on this because you've backed up 8 petabytes in the last week. So is there a monitor or a way to track storage usage and cost?
That's a great question. So from our reporting capability perspective, we absolutely tell you your different levels of storage consumption at different tiers, right? The different backup targets and the number of snapshots, how often you do things like that. It'll allow you to tell that. The question is that if you want specific triggers, alerts on that particular one, that is something you can set up. You can set up an automatic notification. So when it exceeds a certain thresholds.
Okay, so when Larry goes over 10 terabytes in main storage, I can reach out to him and be like, dude, we got to archive some of this, buddy.
From an integration perspective, is this how does this gain visibility into the account? Are you downloading a marketplace appliance? Are you connecting it to the mothership via peer-to-peer VPCs? How are you hooking things up?
That's a great question. So what happens is that we are a true service in the marketplace. To your point, there's nothing, you don't deploy any infrastructure. A customer goes to marketplace and subscribes in marketplace. When they subscribe in marketplace, we create a dedicated instance for them. We create an instance on our project and help it manage it for them, right? That's something we do. The backup service is running in our project. The work, whenever we do, so that's something we fully manage, paid by us, by HYCU. That's not something for the customer, right? What happens is that the customer does have to provide us the credentials because that's how we can operate on it. And when it's credentials, they just provide us the keys, the corresponding keys, and we have access to the right levels of projects based on what they have assigned us, right? That is something only the projects and the accounts they allow us to manage. That's what we end up seeing. So it's a very narrow thing based on the controls. Again, it allows them to manage everything on their AWS identity management stuff rather than having to worry about anything about HYCU.
When we talk about public cloud, let's just say AWS as the example. You made a comment a little while ago that talked about cloud native, being able to restore certain aspects, being cloud visible, all the terms, whatever you used on the dartboard, right? We are still only talking about VM level and application level. We're not talking about being able to restore load balancers, networking, subnets, all the different things outside of the VM and application. Is that true?
That's a good question. That's a great point you mentioned there. So when it comes to when customers are doing individual VMs and apps, they end up doing, typically they will actually manage their networking themselves in a manual way. You can actually specify that, right? But when we do bulk recovery, let's say typically in the case of a DR, or they want to fail over from A to B, that's when they want to do mass networking specific configuration, load balancer changes, things like that. That is something as part of our bulk recovery option. You can actually, customers can set it up saying, hey, when this fails over from A to B, change these settings pre and post. That's something we can absolutely do that for.
Okay, so you can do that. Okay, good.
The two other things I want to mention, a big part for customers, a lot of times in the public cloud, is that who owns my backup data? That's a big worry they actually have, right? In our service, both in the paid service and in the free service, the key thing for us, for the customers, is that customer always owns the data, meaning we do not own the customer's backup data. Be it in the snapshot, be it in a full object storage, we don't own it. It's always in the customer's project. We manage it for them, but it's in the customer's own project. You can actually, we typically recommend they create a separate project to actually back up the data to. That's how we manage it for them. But it is something, the data is within that. People say, so why is that a big deal? There are times when it comes to data sovereignty, especially with some of the countries which are very particular where the data is stored. Number one, it's a big deal. That's number one. Number two, the big thing we think of is that, data is critical, obviously. And the big part we think of is that when it comes to risk management for customers, you got to make sure it is just not, The cloud is already an extra risk the customer is taking in their account. Now, if we add our account to theirs, now you're doubling the risk. We didn't want to do that thing. We wanted to make sure the data should always be in yours. Tomorrow you decide to get rid of HYCU, you should be able to do that. That's the confidence we actually want to provide the customer. And we want to make sure it is simple and secure so they don't have to think that we are trying to hold them hostage with their data. That is something we have actually chosen to do. It's a different philosophy, but that's what we believe that we should actually provide a service with compelling that the customer sticks to us. Again, just a quick summary. Again, this is a free tier of our full full functional solution. What we allow you to do is the backup and recovery using snapshots. That is something available for customers. This is available as a fully managed service on AWS platform for customers to actually choose. And it's a fully elastic scale. At any scale, they can use it, and we're not charging for it. And this is for life, which we offer. That's a quick rundown. I hope I made sense to you guys. And I would love if anybody wants to try it out, just try HYCU.com and they should be able to check it out for customers.